Howdy and welcome back. This is Jean-Marc talking about old sales fails, 5 modern selling alternatives to your old sales habits. Now, while not all things people have been teaching about sales over the years is obsolete, a good amount of it no longer works, especially where it comes to B2B lead generation or sales prospecting. So we'll explore some modern sales alternatives to some old sales habits. First off, what is traditional slash antiquated selling approach? What is it all about? What am I even talking about? Well, the traditional or antiquated sales book relied on a few things. First, it relied on manipulation and technique. It relied on traditional advertising, payment for information, and the customer having a little power. So let's talk about that. First, it relied on the manipulation of customers and a technique. I actually came from a traditional selling background, a short stint as in a traditional selling opportunity. And in that realm, you had the idea that you were almost at war with your customer. It was an interesting thing. If you can think of that old term from Glenn Ross, that old play that coffee is for closers, or ABC always be selling, you get the idea of what I'm talking about. I've actually come into customers from time to time that have this mindset. They'll tell me things like, oh, I need to twist the knife on the people. And this is the idea that you're going to just manipulate them with their pain and eventually they'll buy. And I'm thinking, wow, this is something you want to do to people on purpose? And you want to build a great business relationship with them? Okay, has me scratching my head. This old way of selling also relied on traditional advertising, which is expensive. If you didn't know, it can get very costly. Next, it relied on payment for information, and that's not always based on money or currency. That could be based on time, which is even more valuable. An example I have is back when I was doing traditional sales, one of the opportunities was for a vacation rental company, and they would fly you out and they would set you up in this great locale. But the thing is, the catch was you had to spend your entire day, one day, you just gave it all to them so they can give you a sales pitch. It's like, hey, we know that we are the bee's knees. We know that we have the power and we're doing you a favor. So pay up, right? So before you get this information or you get the free access or the preferred access, you have to pay in some way. And that really fed into the idea that companies had the power in the past. If you ever dealt with a company in the past for even customer service issues, it was wildly different than it is today. I remember companies just not willing to budge on something that was clearly their fault or not clear to the consumer. They just weren't willing to budge because think about it. Some of these were the most powerful companies in the world. Now, we have seen a major shift between what we'd call antiquated or traditional selling to modern selling. So let's talk about what's different about modern selling. It's going to have a few adjustments. First, it's about liking education and trust. Next, leveraging content marketing and multi-channel strategies. It's also about giving information away, and it's about customers owning their power. When it comes to liking education and trust in modern selling, it's a phrase people love to say. I swear, if there were a drinking game and I drink every time someone says people need to like and trust you in order to sell, in order to be sold by you, I would never be sober because it is mentioned so often. And it makes sense given how things have changed for us when it comes to modern selling. I mean, think about it. Back in the day when I'm doing these old traditional selling roles, excuse me, we would make our calls, hundreds a day, and then we hang up the phone. We'd go home. Now, what happens is that when you make that pitch via LinkedIn, that follows you, right? That sucker follows you. They have a bad reaction. You're going to get it when you're at the deli. You're going to get it when you're home. You're going to get it showing up on your phone. So it makes sense that we would care more about liking and trusting in this time. Now, modern selling is also about leveraging content marketing and multi channel strategies because content marketing is going to power a lot of our marketing strategies today. Think of things like blogs, publicity, press releases, search engine marketing, search engine optimization, email marketing, speaking engagements, and I can keep going. There's a long list of like 19 or so different channels. A lot of these are just channels for content distribution. So, content, as you've heard before, is going to be king in the situation because it's going to power a lot of these tools. And it's about giving information away. Modern selling is about giving information away because we're using lead magnets more now. Things like free guides, free checklists, rather, free books, free webinars. We're seeking to educate people in order to get them to buy from us. So we're partnering more with the customer. And we're also admitting that the customer has more power now. We know that customers are really in the driver's seat when it comes to doing business with us. The thing in the past with traditional selling, the idea was we could somehow get people to buy, we could twist a knife like I talked about. But the truth is, people have technology now, they have access to many times better information than we even have at our company. How many times these days have you come into a sales meeting, someone trying to sell you, and you know more about the product or a process than they do? I mean, it's a joke because we all have this ability now to go up and look up thoroughly anything before we decide to buy. So, after all this, you might think, man, maybe it's really hard for me to shift my ways. Maybe we're stuck with poor performance, but you don't have to be. There are good modern sales strategies that you can use instead of your old sales habits. So here are some. One, instead of cold calls, do LinkedIn lead generation. LinkedIn lead generation, as you probably know, it's an easy way to start doing cold calling instead of pick up the old phone and ring people up. The thing is, we have robocallers now that are making oftentimes more than 5 billion calls a day. So it does often put a bad taste in people's mouths as far as picking up the phone. It makes it a little more difficult, a little more trying. I'm not saying cold calling can't work. There's probably a cold calling master watching the video like, I can get, all these people to pick up the phone. Hey, if that works for you, I say do what works for you at the end of the day. Don't just go off me and say, oh, well, he told me to do this. If it works for you, do it, dude. But in the event you're like many of us and you aren't that cold calling master, I'd recommend LinkedIn lead generation. And the added benefit is you're going to get more information from that process without having to get it directly from the person's mouth. So with LinkedIn lead generation, you have really 3 steps of what you have to do. Find the right person, connect with the right person, and pitch the right person. When it comes to finding the right person, make sure you're looking for people with a specific title that can help you. That's typically C-suite folks, vice presidents and such, and directors. Next, when it comes to connecting with them, make sure you use familiarity. I'm going to include a sample connection template in the post itself, but you want to make sure you mention things you have in common, like location, past employers, and career field, because people like to be around similar others. They like to connect with similar others. It actually helps your cause if you can create some familiarity there, which I always recommend. And lastly, pitching the right person. A sales pitch doesn't have to be scary via LinkedIn. It's just a simple ask for an exploratory call or a sales call. And that has 3 tips in itself. The LinkedIn sales pitch, it's really going to first start personally with the pitch. That means actually looking at people's profile and what they're posting about, what they're interested in, and seeing how you can comment or talk to that. Next, say what you're about. Give your quick elevator pitch of what you're working on. An example is, I'm with Bug Free IT. We are an IT service company that helps you protect your data. Simple, easy. I think in every industry, there's someone that thinks that it's so complicated to understand. And really, dude, it's not. It's really, you're not doing nuclear fission here. You can explain what you do simply. Just give an elevator pitch. And lastly, you want to make sure in your message that you seal the deal, that you ask for what it is you have to ask for. If you want a call, ask for the call. A download, ask for the download. If you're asking them to sign up for your webinar, do that. And if you're needing further information on that, feel free to click the link as far as it goes to going to the 9 LinkedIn templates. I created a LinkedIn template master list you can access and has all the templates that I've used. I say most of them that I've used that have worked really well for businesses in the past. You can access that for free on jmsync.com. Number 2, instead of forms, fire up chatbot lead generation. When it comes to web forms are interesting beasts. Most people don't fill them out. So make it simple for them. An easy thing to do instead of forcing people to fill out web forms is to use a chatbot. As you'll see on the site and other sites that I have, you can just have people text or message with a chatbot and you can get leads that way. It's quite effective. Now, understand before you're thinking, dude, are you asking me to get rid of my forms? Yes and no, see what works. See if you can test out a chatbot first. But understand that chatbots have their own design flaws. First, they assumed that people had the time to fill out the forms, which is not always the deal. I mean, regardless of what time you're talking about, even if people are quarantined, they're like, hey, I got other stuff to do, then deal with your stuff, right? Next, it assumed that people have the desire to fill out the forms. And lastly, it assumed that the gated content was rare enough to suffer through contact collection. And as we talked about before, people are able to access so much information. It's likely you're not the only one putting this information out there. So, recommendation, use a chatbot when possible. 3, instead of mail or cold emails, leverage social media. Here's a big thing. I won't get too much into it, but cold email gets a super low hit rate you can imagine because people are like, hey, why should I connect with someone I don't know? They're just like you. They're just like me. So you have to do a whole lot of blasting when it comes to getting people's attention with cold emails. Instead, I'd recommend using something like social media or regular posting, which allows you to get in front of people 20, 30, 50 times if need be. And you're also getting in touch with their connections. It allows you to stay in front of the people that are potential customers. And if you want to stay in front of people that you're not connected with, guess what? You can connect with them using cold LinkedIn messaging. 4, instead of watching traffic, track leads. Now, even folks that are online can fall into this trap. Hey, get more website leads, more website leads. I have people right now, or rather more traffic instead. I have people right now still trying to sell me web traffic. Like, increase your web traffic. 2 experts that are still talking about this. Traffic is great, but what is traffic for? Traffic is hopefully so you can get more customers. I mean, really, would you trade money for website traffic? Of course not. You are in business to get more customers. So how about making that a metric, a bigger metric, a more important metric than just monthly website traffic? So an easy way to do that is going to be chatbot lead generation and using website visitor tracking tools such as Lead Feeder. And Lead Feeder is going to show you the companies that you had visit your site, and you can also click on their dashboard. It will take you to a LinkedIn search that will show you the company and different connections that you most likely have there. It's a pretty cool tool to use. 5, instead of drop-ins, do video messaging. Listen, I am of that generation that drop-ins aren't really our thing. We typically avoid contact whenever possible. We don't pick up the phone. We prefer self-checkout to talking to the cashier. We would just rather separate and kind of control all of our interactions. I've actually had salespeople complain to me, like, what's wrong with your generation? Why won't you guys do this? Listen, instead of complaining, why don't you hit them up where they're at, which is going to be social media, and a way you can get in front of them in that same authentic way is through doing video powered messaging. It's really straightforward. You can go onto your Chrome web store and download a tool called Loom. That's Loom. Record a webcam pitch and explain to people quickly in under a minute why they should connect with you, why it matters, and what they can get out of it. And understand where you want this to go. So for me, I do it so I can get the sales call or the exploratory call. For you, I'd recommend something similar unless you have like a great webinar that you think would be really up your alley and it's a great lead generation tool, then go with that. But if not, I'd recommend getting them on a sales call with video powered messaging. And I'll include specific tips on how to do that in the post as well. And lastly, what are the main selling techniques to know? After all the talk between old and new and old school and new school selling, at the end of the day, we're still dealing with people. So a lot of the old stuff still applies. And I include some tips from Brian Tracy in there, one of the original sales gurus. And he's inspired this list. Now, there are a few things that we're still going to be doing and that still matter in selling. And that's clearly defining who your customer is, getting clear about the problem you're solving for them, focusing on keeping your customers for life. Very important. Let's not treat our sales leads as though we're going to pick them up today and drop them off tomorrow. Let's treat them like the valuable people they are. And lastly, always make sure your sales messages are clear. Let's let people know if we're going to sell them, even if it's on social media, let's be clear about it. Whew. Well, that was Jean-Marc St. Laurent, your boy here, talking about old sales fails, 5 modern selling alternatives to your old sales habits. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Take it easy. Be well. Peace.